Hey everybody, thanks and welcome back to our third webinar this year. We're so excited to have you here. So give me just a hot second while I move over my panelists. We've got a really great panel for you today. First up, we've got Ashley. So Ashley, say hi.
Hi, everyone.
Then we've got Karen. Karen, say hi.
Hello.
We've got Kim. Kim, say hi.
Good morning. Hi.
And finally, we have Mike. Mike, drum roll. You are now live.
Nice.
Okay, there we go. Awesome. Mike, say hello.
It is taking forever to get over here, but I'm here.
It's
Hi,
okay.
everybody.
All right. Well, for those of you guys joining us live, we are so glad to have you here as our audience. We had a really good number of people registered to participate in the webinar, so I hope you guys are able to join in. Those of you who registered, just know that we do these webinars exclusively on air on the Zoom webinar feed, and then we don't actually put them to Facebook until they get edited and put out onto the internet. So if you've seen Cobra Kai, send it to the internet. That's what we do later. So I'm Danae, and I'm so thrilled to have these 4 patients with me today to talk to you guys about kind of the ins and outs of clinical trials. We're going to just talk through the thought process of these patients and why they decided to participate in a clinical trial, where they're at now in their journeys, and just have an open, honest discussion about some of the things that go behind the scenes as a patient might decide to participate or not participate in a clinical trial. So with that, Mike, can I have you go first and go ahead and just tell us who you are, where you're from, where you're at in your diagnosis journey, and if you've done a trial.
My name is Mike Cornell. I am in the Columbus, Ohio area. I am currently at stage 4 with mets in my liver. I have done 2 clinical trials, one when I had mets in my liver, and another one was adjuvant right after my diagnosis, and I was diagnosed to have a class 2 tumor.
Where are you from again?
Columbus, Ohio area.
Columbus, Ohio. Awesome. So Midwest.
Hi, I'm Karen Long. I'm from Billings, Montana. And when I was first diagnosed in 2018, I had to travel because there are very few people in my area that can treat me. So I ended up being treated by Dr. Kim for my ocular tumor in Boston, Massachusetts. And I had proton beam from my eye. And after that, after I found out I was class 2, I looked for a adjuvant trial to try to prevent metastasis. And that led me to Dr. Carvajal in New York. And that adjuvant trial was with 2 drugs that are immunotherapy drugs called Ipi, Nivo, and the other one is Nivo. And those common names are Opdivo and Yervoy. Okay. That trial took place in 2019.
Thank you, Karen. Ashley, what about you?
So I'm Ashley McCrary, and I live in Auburn, Alabama. I was originally diagnosed when I lived in Memphis with, I guess that was 2012. I have to think about it. It was 12 years ago. I went 8 years without metastatic disease, and in 2020, I'm about to have my cancerversary, I guess you would say. Sadly, October 1st, I had mets to my liver. I did immunoembolization in Philadelphia for 8 months, only to find out that wasn't working, but I was PRAME positive and HLA positive. During that time period, Dr. Sato suggested the PRAME trial. So I've been on the PRAME trial since June of 2021. I had progression of disease from my liver to my lung and my breast. And so because of that, they added Kimtrack in July of 2023. So I've been on that for a year. Most of you know it's a once a week infusion, both of them, PRAME and Kimtrack. So I fly from Auburn, Alabama to Philadelphia once a week for treatment. And for me, it's been very effective.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ashley.
I'm Kim Bro. I'm from Kissimmee, Florida, by way of Boston, Massachusetts, about 6 years ago. So I was diagnosed 3 years ago, actually, in 2 weeks. So October 2021. Immediately, I got, if I wanted to go on to a clinical trial with Dr. Sato's team after I was found out it was class 2. They don't give you a lot of time to think. You either yes or no and jump. And I jumped because you jump when you have this disease, apparently. So no regrets. So far, no meds. It was all adjuvant. I had my latest scan last Monday and still knock on wood, still clear.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing, you guys. And just for the record, I too have done a clinical trial. I did an adjuvant trial. That's actually how I met Kim, as I was in the same adjuvant trial just a few months ahead of Kim. And I believe that Kim, you also messaged me and asked like, hey, did you do this? Why or why not? What was it like? So that was helpful, like to be able to talk to other patients who had or had not done a trial. So let's just jump in, you guys. What influenced your decision to decide on one of these trials that you participated in? Like, did you have different talks with your doctor? Did you talk with friends? Let's kind of just get an idea of who did what and how you came to the idea that you wanted to actually do one of the trials you've been in. Mike, do you want to go first?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I've been on 2 trials. So when I was originally diagnosed back in April 2027 or 2017, we're not that far yet. So in 17, once I got the results back that I was class 2, I'd already been kind of searching around, right? Like, what can I do? And Ohio State, my oncologist at the time, had the crizotinib trial for adjuvant therapy. So I jumped on it. I was like, let's do it. Zero regrets of doing it. I still believe that, whether it's true or not, you can't tell with adjuvant whether the stuff works or not, but I think there's, like, I just say that's why it took 6.5 years for it to spread. That's the way I think about it. So that was 48 weeks on that drug. That was intense, but like I said, no regrets. And it's interesting now that I know that there's other trials using that drug. People start commenting about it in our various forums. I'm like, oh yeah, that's that drug. I know that side effect. I know it all well. So, folks, if you're feeling those gastro things, and then so when I had metastasis, I immediately started looking around because I was in a weird spot in October of last year. So I'm like coming up, it's like literally 2 weeks away from the year of having met. When that hit, you really couldn't go out and get Hepzato kits because it really wasn't rolled out anywhere. They were in this weird spot where you really couldn't find it in a lot of spots. And I'm a person, if you go back to the original question, is why would you do this? I'm a bias to action. So if I'd rather do something than nothing. So when I found out that I could take a chemoembolization trial out at Jefferson, I jumped on it and I figured out a way to get myself into it within less than a week, maybe a little more than a week from when I had whatever happened. When we knew it was going down, I was getting a embolization done. So it was very, very fast. And I flew out there for 4 months. Things were mixed, is how they put it. Basically, all the big tumors I had showed fuzziness and damage, but 2 new ones popped up in the middle that didn't make a lot of sense. So maybe they were hiding. But once that ended, then I went on. I've been on Kimtrack since then. And things, is there wood around here? The real wood, things are doing as well as they can, I guess is the way I would put it.
Okay, well, Mike, thank you so much for your insights. And so just to recap, you considered both an adjuvant trial and a current metastatic treatment trial.
I did both,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. And it sounds like you said, that this kind of bias toward action, I can relate to that. I think that some of us probably all relate to that to some degree, that like there's this feeling of, like Kim said, with this cancer, you jump because you jump. Like that you have to do something, or at least sometimes it feels that way, because if you don't, then you can't, say that you did everything you could at that point. I don't know. That was kind of my thinking, was what was it going to hurt me, as long as I could manage side effects, things like that. I also didn't want to have the off chance that what if it could help? I had no guarantees that it wouldn't, so why not?
Everything you just said is so true. I mean, I was diagnosed on a Friday afternoon in October. In Orlando. You come out of there, I didn't know where I was. My eyes were dilated. It was bright and sunny, and my in-laws were at my house waiting to go to dinner. They had just flown in, and I came out and he said you had ocular melanoma, an ophthalmologist, and I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea. So I'm driving home. I can't say I got lost 3 times, calling my mother, calling friends, just trying to find my way. And by the next Wednesday, I was in Miami in Dr. Murray's chair, and he's like, in 2 weeks, you're having, plaque radiation. Everything went so fast. And he also said, when we get, he didn't let me get scans. He didn't tell me to do anything. He said, I'm going to do a biopsy. He says, it's big. It's probably class 2. I still don't know what he's talking about. So you go home and you research, and it's like, it's a death sentence. Is what it sounds like. I mean, you guys give me hope that have been here 12 years or a year with Mets, Mike. Congratulations. Unfortunately, same with you, Ash. You grasp on research, you find groups, you find you guys, you ask questions. Thank God. I don't want to be in these groups anymore, but I help people now. So when I came back class 2, he's like, I'm sending you to the best in the world. And he sent me to Dr. Sato, and he had a trial. You don't think about it. You just do it. I didn't have time. I didn't feel like I had time. You're so scared, you're so nervous, and you just do it. I don't think I would have done it if they said you could get a placebo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's stuff like that, you know, for, I guess, other cancers and other stuff, but I don't think I would have done that. I wanted a shot. But I remember thinking, this was so bad. When you look up the info, it's so devastating that if I can help someone after me, that's why I did it. I didn't even feel like I was helping me. I felt like I was doing it for the rest. It's so strange. It was terrifying, but it felt selfless. And it's still terrifying. I'll be 3 years in 2 weeks, and it's terrifying every day. But I did this trial, and Jeanette, you know, we don't know if it worked, but some people that were on it aren't.
Know that it didn't work. Like, we don't know that it didn't help.
Yeah.
I am 2 years plus into metastatic disease with really slow progressing disease. So knock on, the real wood somewhere.
Yeah.
But also, like, we don't know that the Sutent and the VPA trial that I did with Sato didn't help. And I love that you mentioned, that your doctor referred you elsewhere, right? Referred you as a class 2 patient to have better care somewhere else on the East Coast that made more sense for you. And I do want to just reiterate to you guys, like, I love the East team, and I recognize a lot of you guys here in our panel are actually from the Midwest and from the East. And so to some of you, it makes a lot more sense to go East. But there are some really incredible centers out here on the West side too. In the Midwest, we've got Nashville, we've got Dr. McKean in Nashville. We've got Dr. Moser out here in Phoenix and Scottsdale. He's my doctor. Not that I'm biased. We've got some really incredible doctors in the California area, the Seattle area, the Washington. Like, there are doctors all over the place. So please, 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 if traveling is one of your reasons for not seeing a better doctor, look elsewhere. You might not be being told about all of the doctors that are out there. I know a lot of people in Facebook groups seem to hear a lot about the East Coast, but that's not the only place you can get treatment. So I did want to just make sure to reiterate that.
I'd
Go
like
ahead,
to
Karen.
chime in because my adjuvant trial, I have the results from my adjuvant trial, and that is super exciting because I'll touch back on when I was first diagnosed. I'll just say I was sitting in the chair, and my retinologist said to me also, you're going to go have this treatment and this treatment. The brachytherapy was what he originally said. And I looked at him and I said, is there a chance that I could lose my sight? And he said, I am less concerned with your sight than I am about your mortality. And I just sat there stunned. And at that point, there were no tears. It was action. It was total action. What am I going to do to save my life? And the adjuvant trial ended up being part of that decision. First of all, it was treatment, of course, and I ended up doing the proton beam. But being on the East Coast, and again, faith is really a part of my life, and God led me to Boston, and then God led me to New York, and I firmly believe that. But this trial, when I got into it, I didn't. I looked at that thick book of all the side effects. I think there were 26 pages. All of you know this, right? And I thought, you know what? I can deal with the side effects, because if that, the chance of the cancer killing me is up here and the side effects are down here, I'll deal with this. And I still have, I'm sure that many of you do, some lingering side effects from the trial. I'm living with those side effects. Living is the word. And so I can deal with that. And so, but with the results of my trial were good enough that it warrants more trial, more investigation, because it moved the needle. So the immunotherapy, 2 drugs, the Opdivo and the Yervoy together, the goal was to see if we could extend the life, or at 50%, or at 3 years, we all had 50% chance of developing mets.
Yeah.
That has been moved out 74 now. So, excuse me, the line has moved out. If
so, like,
these 2 drugs,
correct?
Longer, exactly, the percentage, because at 5 years, it was going to be 80%. So it's moved out. So with these two drugs, I didn't develop Mets at 5 years, or at, oh goodness, I'm tripping on my words here. At 3 years, I was clean of Mets at 3 years. However, I did develop my first Mets at 5 years. So I've had one Met to the liver, one Met to my left hip, and I've just recently finished treating a Met to my sacrum. So, however, 1, 2, 3 individual lesions, and my Dr. Carvajal does believe, I think this is what you were talking about with the crizotinib trial, it minimized the amount of lesions, not in many coming to the liver, like multiples, tens, or however. It was one. And that is a lot easier to treat than the multiples. So again, why I am advocating for adjuvant trials or any trial is because we're finding out answers. And we knew that ipi-nivo, these two drugs were effective in the metastatic setting, meaning they were able to shrink tumors when it was metastatic. They weren't able to cure, but they're able to shrink. So the thought was, could these drugs kill the micrometastasis? And I believe, and so does Dr. Carvajal, says it did. So we have proof that it did help.
No, that's so incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. And Karen, if you want to maybe send us the link for that study, we can share that with the audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
During my first 6 months of treatment, like I said, was IE. And during that time period, I had, of course, had a biopsy of both my eye and the tumor that was in my liver. I knew from the eye it was class 2, but I didn't have all the genetic markers checked at that time because, to be honest with you, in 2012, they didn't do that. And so in looking, they, of course, found out if I was HLA positive or negative. And those who are joining this call who don't know what that is, that's a simple blood test that even your primary care doctor can order. And it's actually HLA, I believe, :AA2. Is that right, Danae?
HLA 0102.
And so if you're positive, it may, for one, and if you're PRAME positive, and if you're class 2, those are prognostic indicators of whether or not it's more likely to metastasize. And so I was PRAME positive, class 2, HLA positive, and at the time, Tebi was in a clinical trial. Immunocore is the sponsor of both Tebi or Kimtrac and PRAME, which are the drugs that I'm on. And when Dr. Sato came in and we were talking about, he was like, it looks like that you're having some good results from IE, but we're starting to see some new tumors pop up. And I already had what they said were innumerable tumors, over 100 tumors in my liver. So he said, I'm not sure if we're going to continue doing this. I wonder if you're PRAME positive. Well, I had just gotten the results back that morning. And when I told him, if y'all know Dr. Sato, he could be very difficult to understand when he gets really excited. And he got really excited and he said, we need to move her to the top of the list, put her to the top of the list. And, and I had never heard of this trial. And so I had 2 months to be able to do some research on it. And at that time, a friend of mine, Summer Erica, was on it. And this was, during the dose escalation time of PRAME, where people were starting out at 5 micrograms, and then the next cohort was 10 micrograms, the next was 15 micrograms. And so he came to me and he said, we have a new cohort. There's only 4 spots and in the United States, and we're going to have 2 of them. But the catch is that you would be on the highest dose given to humans. And I'll be honest with y'all, it was at this point, sadly, what I did know about the trial is, because Summer was one of the first on it, but the second lady on PRAME, they now know she had comorbidities, but at the time they didn't know this, but she had PRAME one day and died the next day. And it was one of those very stressful, like, okay, what happened? Well, they had to stop the trial and they reconfigured the protocol and they found out that she had some pulmonary and heart issues that if you have those issues, you don't qualify for the trial. But that was just another filter that Dave and I had to go through is, this is an experiment and it is a big decision. And with very shaky pens, we signed the documents. But I also, we were very much so on top of the research and seeing that PRAME was making a really big difference in people's lives. So I, believe it or not, was not as scared as Dave was. I was kind of like all of y'all, give me something to do, because the way this was presented to me is kind of like what Kim was saying, is it wasn't that this was curative in nature. It's not that they came and said, PRAME is the Holy Grail. what they said was this is possibly can increase your overall survival. And if you ever see that written in a document, it's written OS. And then it was presented to me, one of the things that we want to do, what Dr. Orloff was telling me, is we want to keep you on something as long as we can, because during that time period, it's very likely that something else is going to come out that you can be a part of. And at this point, I didn't have anything that would prevent me from being on the trial. And I was just like, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Where Dave is thinking, you're an experiment. What are we doing? Why can't we do something that's like safe and whatnot? But I was a little bit like, I could tell all of y'all's reaction when I think we learn both from the positive results of clinical trials and what things come back like, that aren't good, and that we can pass that information on to kind of the next generation, if you will, of what I'm doing hopefully will help those later. And that was really important to me. I won't go into it today, but I have a strong community of ocular melanoma friends that I knew really well, which is unusual. And I had watched two of my friends, close friends, pass away, had watched them get on clinical trials. I watched them also live through like 17 different meds, 17 years of treatment and living a really good quality of life. That sounds awful, but they were able to raise their children and see their kids graduate, see their kids have babies. And I was like, I want that. I want that. So put me on this trial. So I started the clinical trial, like I said, and it was one of the most fun things because my first scan, Dr. Sato, like the whole team, I have this video of them responding to when they got the results. I was the first person, in these trials to actually have a partial response. And a partial response is whenever you have a decrease of, I think, 36%. And he was so excited, he got me tickets to the Eagles game for me and two of my kids. He was just so beyond, like, it had not happened yet. And so they were so excited about that. The results were just I was just blown away. I was like, Karen and I, we communicate often on Facebook, and both of our faith is so important. And I had just really prayed through this and had such a peace about it that then to get the result of this partial response was just incredible. And then I was actually, I pulled these up just because I think it'd be cool, and I'll be able to show y'all just in a picture form, just real quick. There's two pictures I want to show y'all. So I'm going to see how I can do this. This was my liver. Y'all see all those little dots?
Yeah.
Those are all my tumors. Okay. Okay. The partial response.
Wow.
Yeah.
Partial?
It looked a lot better than partial to me. But
Yeah,
hey,
exactly.
I'm not a
Right.
doctor.
Okay, but these are slides. So this was another that just shows kind of measurable ones. I went through, where you can see the decrease of the small scattered spots, and then this being, I mean, y'all, it's
Wow.
just significant. So
Yeah.
and that just gave me hope to be able to stay the task. And yes, there are side effects. I very quickly, I'll just tell y'all that the day of treatment, it's about a 30-minute infusion. This drug has to thaw, so I have to get there. And then anyway, you can have side effects, but they're all manageable. Every single one of them are manageable. I have a great quality of life, even though people are like, how do you travel that much? And I just couldn't do that. But where I am in my phase of life, it's like having a job that you travel out of town 2 days a week. And then I come back, I'm very tired. I rest a day, and then I'm gangbusters. I can kind of do whatever. And if you follow me, I do whatever. And I feel like I have a great quality of life. And then for me, when I did have a rogue tumor, and we'll talk about this later, I had a rogue tumor that kind of took off. And we learned from that. We learned, are some of the tumors able to suppress the PRAME antigen and hide it so that the drug doesn't attack it? That's one of the theories. Some of the theories that are out there that we've learned through this trial is that possibly you can have tumors in your liver that have PRAME on it, and some don't. Okay, that's weird.
Things.
Yeah. And so that's why I actually had one radiated, and today we were talking about how that can look, and it can look bigger than it is. Again, we won't go into that, but that was something else that I'll tell you was really nice about the trial that I'm on, is just how my doctors in particular have advocated for me, because when you have progression to a certain extent, you should be kicked off a trial. And when I had this one rogue tumor, when I say rogue, it went from 0.4 to 1.6 to 3.2, like in 8 weeks. It was just really a bizarre tumor. And Marlena was so kind to, she made a PowerPoint presentation about me, my children, my family, the life I live. And she sent it to Immunocore. And she said, I know the temptation is to kick her off this trial, but look how she's benefiting from this clinically. Can we not just treat this one tumor with radiation and keep her on the trial? And they agreed. And here I am, 2 years later from that. So I just, like I said, finished my 171st treatment of this. And what I see it is there's probably going to be a day that I'll have to change. But that whole overall survival, initially I was given 1 year, 1 month, and here I am, living my best life. And it's buying me time in the process. We have all these new treatments that are coming out. So I'm just highly encouraged. So that's one reason I decided, Danae, to get on this trial. For one, Dr. Sato was so excited about it. And then I will tell you, I went from the more to 40 micrograms. The next cohort was 80 micrograms, then 160 micrograms, then 320. You actually have a cohort that'll go above the toxicity rate just to see what's too toxic. They realized that was too toxic. They felt like the perfect spot was around 80 to 160. And now the trial that I'm on, it's a little bit less than that. But in that dose escalation part, that's a fun place to be. It's kind of scary, but we learned so much, and now we know, we know what the right treatment protocol should be. So it's really cool to be
I
part
love
of it.
Well, thank you,
Can I ask a
Ashley. That was
question?
so neat. Yeah, go ahead.
Ashley, can you take a week off? Can you go on a European vacation for 2
Absolutely.
weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've done that. Like Christmas week, I'll take off this year for Christmas. I'll take off. They don't want you to go more than 10 days. And if you go more than 10 days, sometimes you have to go back into the hospital to have your treatment again. I've never had to do that. I've gone on several trips. That has not been a
So
problem.
that's a
Or
good-
I've spread
question.
my treatments out to where I was able to do that. That is a good question.
No, that's a super good question. So, Mike, you are someone else who's also been on a metastatic trial. Were you on something that you had an oral drug, or was it something that you were going in person to do?
No, mine was embolization. It was every 4 weeks. I went in, had that done. I was in, it was really fast if I think about it. I'm fortunate in that, and we were talking about travel, and I was fortunate because I have family that's very close by in Philadelphia area in the suburbs. So I can effectively, I get on the plane from Columbus, I got there, I would take the train down to Sato's office, I would get checked out, go hang out with my parents and my sister, come back the next day, get the treatment. Then effectively on Wednesday, I would just take the train to the airport and I'm out of there. Like it was very, very manageable, super fast and that type of stuff. But it wasn't the oral treatment I had for crizotinib, that for the adjuvant, that was at home, getting scanned every 3 months through Ohio State. It's Dr. Carvajal actually ran that trial, but Dr. Olenke, who is retired, was my original oncologist at Ohio State. He had an arm of that. And what's interesting about that trial is it failed in terms of the results. It was a failure, but the reason it was a failure, if I understand what I read properly, and one of the doctors probably can correct me if I'm wrong, that's listening to this eventually, is that people couldn't handle the drug. They were looking for folks who were younger, I guess. I'll put younger in air quotes. I was 43 at the time, so I could handle it. I know 2 other people who were on that trial. They were both that went all the way through. A lot of people just had to opt out. They couldn't handle the dosage. They couldn't handle the side effects. So effectively it failed, which is unfortunate. But, we learned some stuff from that. What's interesting about it is they learned enough to say, actually, we want to keep this and tie it with something else, right? Because there's an actual trial going on with it, or recently, I don't know if it's still going on, with it combined with another drug.
It is.
So it's fascinating to me that they must have learned something from that trial to try to use it somewhere else, even though technically it was a failure.
Well, and I can speak to that just, having interviewed the chief medical officer at IDEA, who is the ones behind that trial. And Darren Beaupre, he actually did an interview. If you guys go back on the I Believe podcast, go back on our YouTube channel, you can find that video where he talks about the reason they went from crizotinib to crizotinib plus darovasertib. And I've had to work really hard to say that name, you guys. I'm sure you guys all get it. Like the drug names, like they're a little psycho. So for those of you guys listening, we all had to learn it too. And sometimes we still mess it up. But I wanted to just kind of highlight a little of what some of you guys have illustrated here. So just to kind of recap as we are moving on to some of the next questions that I want to talk to you about, we've got people who have participated in a trial and it really hasn't shown a whole lot of disruption to their daily life. So Kim and Karen, I think I would say you guys are probably the ones that your life, and maybe me, as far as the clinical trial we were in, it was the least disruptive, right? It didn't really impede normal life too much. Would you guys agree? In terms of like, let's say travel, in terms of traveling. No?
I
Okay, so
had to
Karen, go for it.
I traveled every 2 weeks to New York from
Okay.
Montana. So, and that was, I had to pay for that. That was not something that, insurance would pay for. But insurance took care of everything once I was in New York, all of the
Okay.
blood tests, all of everything. But my travel was on me.
Okay. Well, and that's kind of a good thing to note. But as far as like, I wanted to just kind of touch on the normal life disruptions, right? That trials sometimes can feel like they can disrupt your daily life a lot. Like in Ashley's case or in Mike's case, like there was some travel that was pretty frequent, and also in Karen's case. I know Kim and I had to travel roughly every 3 months to just go and get a new batch of drugs for the trial that we were in. So that wasn't hugely disruptive, but similar to Karen, Kim, Karen, and I all had to foot the bill for our travel for those periods of time to go to that adjuvant trial. And so that's a factor, right? That's something that may influence the decision to do or not do it. Is, do you have the ability to do that? Do you have the funds? Do you have the wherewithal? Do you have the time, right? Do you have the time in your schedule? I think these are all just questions that we ask ourselves. And I think it comes down to some of what you were talking about. I can't remember I can't remember if it was Kim or if it was Karen. One of you had your hand up and you were pointing out that like, okay, my class 2 diagnosis is up here. This is my risk here. Here's my side effects. And maybe here's all of the cons of the trial. Can I tolerate this for a short duration of time? And I think that with an adjuvant trial, maybe you guys can chime in here, but I think with an adjuvant trial, it's a little easier because there's a set duration of time, right? It's usually like there's 6 months or there's 1 year. Versus when you're on a metastatic trial like Ashley or like Mike was on, you're on this thing until it's going to stop working. That's kind of, I mean, until it stops working or until you decide you're done, because I think that's really important. Can we just all, by raise of hands, were you all given permission to quit the trial at any point if you wanted to?
Yes.
Just because you wanted to. You didn't have to have a reason other than you just wanted to be done. Okay. I just think that's super important, because I think that sometimes when we see as patients, right, we see the giant book of side effects, we see all of the consent forms that can come through in consenting to a trial, and it can feel like you're signing your life away. So I just want to highlight to our listeners, like, you're not signing your life away. You still have the ability to advocate for yourself. You can tell your doctors what you want, and it's important that you communicate with them. Can you guys all, like, everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. This is a good question. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
As far as side effects go, any side effect I had, I called my nurse and she immediately sent me something or had an advice for what to do to take care of it. So they took care of me. And if I needed to go to another specialist to take care of the side effect, they sent me to the specialist. So they were very, very good at taking care of any side effect that I had.
And I think that generally is the case, right? That when you have a clinical trial team, especially for a rare cancer, people on the team who are your caretakers in the team, right? Your oncology nurses, the trial coordinators, like, they are doing everything they can to make sure that you have the right information and that you have the right support. Whether or not we tap into that as patients and actually take advantage of maybe the extra support that they have or the resources that they're giving us, that's on us, right? We are the horse led to water, we have to drink. But for the most part, I do think that, at least across the board from people that I've heard participating in a clinical trial, they have the support available to them.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
And anyone who has had a negative experience, like, I don't want to, speak to saying that that's the case for everyone, because I think it's still possible to have a difficult experience in a clinical trial. And that may be the reason that someone chooses not to participate in the future. But I do think that those experiences are a little bit less common than the better ones. So I guess, I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. But let's talk a little about some of the hesitations. Like, what were some of the big hesitations for you guys in doing the trial that you decided to do? Or that if you've considered other ones. I think Mike and Ashley, you guys could probably speak to considering other trials. What are the big hesitations? And I don't, when I say that, I think let's talk like more specifics. Like, let's say, like, okay, well, finances. or toxicity or the time it would take or things like that.
Well, I could
Let's-
speak to that in that when Dr. Sato first, I just can remember when he said, telling me about the praying trial, he said, the only thing about this is it's once a week. And my sister was with me, Debbie, at the time. And I remember having to exhale and thinking, once a week, like I was doing something once a month, and I thought that was a lot. And I mean, it was a very, 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 very big decision. And finances did come into play for me. I share my story about this all the time, and I think somebody else said, I think Karen said that. So a lot of times, and it's not every time, so I want to make sure that people know this, but I think if you're talking to somebody about a trial, it's worth asking. The clinical trial does pay for a lot of things for me. I don't mind telling y'all, it pays for my specific flight, my room, it pays for the drug, it pays for the lab work. It does not pay for my food or Uber, just I get a little
The
bit like a
pieces in
stipend.
between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was very fortunate, and I'm just one of those unicorns in this, and that I have a cancer plan through Aflac. So when he said it would be once a week, and Debbie was like, oh, I can't imagine being able to afford that. Like I was able to rest in the fact that I was going to have payment from the clinical trial plus payment from my cancer plan. So it really took that part out of the equation. But then I had to factor in, like you're saying, and I'm just gonna be really honest with this. Danae and I have even talked about this a couple of times, but my kids were, some were still at home, and the things that you have to realize that you miss. And I grieved part of that. I grieved what I thought my life was going to look like. I was very happy in the job that I did and doing IE. I was still working full time. The negative, I'm just tossing some negatives out there. And you know me, Danae, I'm very positive, but I'm just being real here. But just missing out on some things, Kim not being able to just pick up and go on a trip just anytime I really had to plan things. I was caring for my parents, elderly parents at the time, and I was thinking, gosh, I don't know how is that going to work? I had to go on disability. There's just a host of things. But what it ended up leading to was, I don't know, just kind of I want to be a good steward of what I've been given. And so I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this well, by gosh. And when I go, it's not going to be this heavy, daunting, awful thing. But there are 1,000 people who wish they could walk one day in my shoes. And I know that because there are people who wish that they could do the trial that I'm on, and they can't for one reason or another. So I try just to receive it as a gift and to embrace it, and I don't complain. It would be very rare that you would hear me complain that I get to go do this, because I recognize that not everybody can do what I'm doing. But those are just some factors that I think went into the decision making. And what I decided was exactly beautifully put by Karen is I want to live, and then I've got the inconvenience of travel, and I want to live. And so those are just some of the pros and cons, I guess, of it. But it also,
and Ashley, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. I was just gonna say, it also led me into something I became very passionate about, which is the fact that if people can't afford to travel, my husband and I started a foundation in May that is strictly, we raise money for helping people travel for treatment. And the only stipulation is that you have ocular melanoma. It does not mean you don't have to show us any financial hardship. It's a hardship for everybody to have to travel
Just having this
anywhere.
diagnosis and being told you have to travel anywhere is hard enough.
Yeah. So we sponsored our 17th person yesterday, and it is incredible, but it's just by the grace of God that's worked out. But it really gave me something to be passionate about, something to focus on that's really turned out to be something absolutely incredible.
Well, and you bring up a really good point is to the fact that, you bring up a really good point in the sense that, while insurance maybe, or the trial may not specifically cover travel, which I can say that for the most part, in most of the metastatic trials, I think that the travel is more commonly covered than not. Maybe not guaranteed, but it is definitely one of those questions that
a portion,
when you're having that conversation about whether or not you're going to participate, it's definitely one of the questions to ask is how much, if any, travel is covered. And can you have a caretaker with you, right? Can you bring someone with you on that travel, especially if you have to travel states and states away? Which I know, Ashley, that's kind of more the case for you, is that you've got to go from the south up to northern eastern coast. And So that's something to keep in mind. But the other thing to keep in mind, and this has just kind of been my attitude with some things, is that, okay, so it didn't get covered, right? So my insurance didn't cover my travel to go to the trial for VPA and student in Philadelphia. I still wanted to do it. So what avenues of assistance were there? So then I started looking. And so I am of the opinion that when our brain starts asking questions, the world and the universe and our brain will start presenting us with answers. So if you ask a question, your brain wants an answer and it will do everything it can to figure it out. That's just my personal belief philosophy. So I really think that it's figure out. I think that even if you have all of these obstacles, if you really want to find a way, you can find a way. And it might be through a foundation like Ashley. It might be through kind of piecing together aid from different foundations like the Ocular Melanoma Foundation or A Cure in Sight. We have a travel aid and financial aid program that you can apply for. And while they're not all going to be exactly the same, right? They're not going to all have, the same stipulations or not stipulations. They are still pieces of a puzzle you can fit together to create a way that you can find financial aid. Because of my age, I was able to get specific financial aid through Jefferson that was very contingent on me being under a certain age, and it was just a grant. So like there's just so many possibilities out there. You just have to be willing to look for them. And I think that that's really the most important thing, is to be willing to look for the answers to the inconveniences or to the barriers that you might be running into, and just see if there's a possibility that it could work out. Because like Ashley and Karen and everybody else on here has said, the cost of the inconvenience versus the reward, I guess, or the give back of just being able to be okay longer, that is invaluable, I think, for most of us. We all want that time, right? We want that assurance that we have more time. Okay, so I want to just cover real quick. Have any of you guys had, and this may not really apply to Karen and Kim since you guys have only had the adjuvant therapy, so hold on. But this is just a brief answer. Have you had a standard of care treatment that you've been able to continue on the trial? And Ashley, I know you touched on the radiation and how Sato's team was able to advocate for you to stay on the trial. So Mike, I guess this question is more for you. Have you been able to pursue any standard of care treatments?
So there was no standard of care during the adjuvant trial that I was on. I should note that the reason may make it a little more clear. The reason I jumped on the trial I was offered out at Jefferson for the chemoembolization was because I could not do HEPZATO KIT. And the only other thing that was offered was Kimtrack. And I had tumors that I thought looked too big. So I had, what did my scan results say? Dozens or 20 plus. And I had some that were in the 5 centimeter range that felt big to me, right? So I was like, I want to directly attack these things. So that was literally, I'm not waiting for HEPZATO KIT to get stood up down in Tampa, because I know they were working on it, and I think I could have gotten in, I never really researched going in there, but based on what I was reading, I was like, it's January, it's October, I'm going now. There isn't a standard of care other than Kimtrack, and I'm now on Kimtrack, which is fine. But it's you know what I mean? It's nothing has been denied to me. And we're currently, as far as I'm, how do I put it? I'm aggressively considering plan Bs and Cs is what I would say. I have plan B and Cs in my head about what they are. HEPZATO KIT is one of them. My oncologist doctor has a plan C, which is a trial, I believe, that's down. There's something in Cincinnati that's available, supposedly. I don't remember what it is because it could change tomorrow. There could be a plan D that I want to look at, right? Because right now Kimtrack is kind of working. So we're not ready to pull that trigger yet, but we have those options available, ready to go from a standard. If the current standard of care doesn't work, what can I get into? And I did think it was interesting that everyone I've talked to on this from a doctor's perspective has always been, we want to make sure whatever we do doesn't somehow eliminate future things that we might need to do. Keep all of those options open. So they're always talking about that. At least the guidance I had received was hey, this shouldn't preclude you from things. The only thing I think I've been precluded from was the crizotinib trial. I probably don't qualify for because I had it before. But maybe not. No one's really sure because I haven't gone to ask yet.
And Danae, I did have, for my breast tumor, I was offered the standard of care of radiation, which I had 3 weeks ago. So again, was not kicked off the trial. I did have we had to advocate for it, but
I think that's the important thing, is that if you have something changing it's important that you recognize you have to speak up. We as
Yeah.
patients have to speak up. If we want something, I think that one of the things that I have learned in just my interactions, because I talk to pharmaceutical companies who are hosting these trials. I talk to them all the time. That's part of my job. I talk to them a lot. And I have some really good, solid relationships with these individuals. And they are all genuinely concerned for us as patients.
Yeah.
They want us to be okay. And so just going into it and just not assuming that you have restrictions and just assuming that you can advocate for yourself and you can ask for what you want, and that if there's a will, there might be a way.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So, okay,
Yeah.
let's cover, as we're getting to the end, because you guys, this has been such an awesome conversation. But have you guys, before you did any of the trials you've done, just raise your hand or, let's just go yes or no. Did you speak to other people who had been on a similar trial?
I did.
No.
Okay. Karen, no. Kim?
Janae, I think I talked to you.
I think you talked to me.
I think you did. I think I did.
I'm
You know,
pretty sure I was the convincing factor.
No, for
I
real,
think
like, can we just go back for 1 second on
Oh
travel
yeah,
and
sure.
stuff?
Go ahead, Kim.
You know, like as for anyone that's listening that is just diagnosed and you're looking into getting into these adjuvant trials, I mean, it's a lot. And you talk about travel. I'm in Kissimmee, Central Florida. My OO is in Miami, 5 hours away on a good day of traffic. And then I got referred to Philadelphia. So there is a lot of travel. And to say what you said, if just make it happen, it's so much more than just that. And I think the first time I talked to you was about the trial, because when you find out, okay, every 2 weeks you have to go for blood work, and every 3 months you need scans, and you need an echocardiogram, and you need a CT. And when I sat down with the paperwork, my head exploded with the time. Time is money. Time, like this was so much pressure to understand this disease. And now I had 6 months from diagnosis to decide to get in the trial. And I remember talking to you and you're like, you just go, you just put on your calendar and you just go for 2 weeks. And I'm like, fine. But I still hear you say that. And I think we were probably typing, you didn't even talk to me. And I just went back this morning just to prepare for this. And I had emails with Liam at Dr. Sato's office. And I was trying to get around the price of the flights and can I make my appointments? You need a caretaker. I couldn't go alone. That's PTO for someone else. That's a cat sitter. I don't have kids, but I have pets.
Right.
I don't know anyone in Florida. We had only been here 3 years. There was no one to, there's so much involved. But when I wasn't in Philadelphia, I had to go to Miami. Yes, I got help from a Cure Insight and Ocular Melanoma Foundation, but most of that was, we'll give you a hotel room. I don't want to stay overnight. I got to get back home. I can't take another day out of work. My wife can't take a day out of work. It's a lot. It's a lot for a new person, but you can do it. We did it. It was
Yeah.
a year. The drugs were not fun. I lowered my dose a few times. The stress itself, I
Well,
think.
sometimes you have to take breaks. If you're taking an
Yeah,
oral
yeah,
medication, sometimes they tell you,
yes.
oh, if the side effects are this bad, you have to take a break for 2 weeks or a month.
And every time I took a break, I felt like I was failing. And then at the end, it was a year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute, I took 3 breaks. Do I add on those 6 weeks? And they're like, no, it's over. And I'm like, no, I
No,
want that
it's over.
time. I want the
Give me
medicine.
more stuff, right?
Yes.
Right,
yes.
right.
There's so many factors.
Yeah,
but
Kim,
there
I
is help,
appreciate
like
you
you
bringing that
said.
up.
Yeah.
I think it's
there's-
so important to
Yep.
bring up the mental load that goes into this
Yeah.
decision-making
Huge.
process.
And
It's
that never
huge.
goes
It
away.
is. Yeah, it really is. I do think that it gets, like, the more times you do it, and I say this is kind of, it's an unfortunate thing, right? That the more times that you have to be confronted with that information, kind of dice it apart, sit with the decision-making process, maybe the more fluid the decision-making process becomes for you, because you know what is important to you as a person. You start to learn that the longer you're in a metastatic diagnosis, I think that becomes a little more, I don't want to say easy, but like fluid. You get better at knowing, yeah, nope, that's a dead no, and that's a yes.
Yeah.
Like you get really clear on what's okay and what's not with you personally. But Mike, I'm going to have you answer the question as well. Now I can't even remember what the question
I was
was.
gonna say, what are we talking about again? I'm trying to remember what we're talking about again. But I will, you know what? In lieu of not remembering what we were talking about, let me make one comment as far as like back to the decision making about whether to do a trial or not and the bias towards action. Because this did kind of come up in the periphery. So like when I first was diagnosed, I had one and only one goal. And can't really say that, but it was really focused on one thing. And I said, I got to get my kids, see my kids graduate middle school.
Yeah.
So understand, when I was diagnosed, I was doing open my eye, close my eye. Like the reason I even went to go get checked out, when they were going into middle school, I was sitting in an auditorium. I was looking like, why are there wavy lines at the bottom of this screen and stuff,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, oh. And so I had one and only one goal. That was to make it through those 3 years. And as soon as I made it through those 3 years, I had a new goal, which was to make it to high school. And so this happened, you know, they have graduated and they're off at college and stuff now. But
Yay.
like that was like October, right? So this
Yeah.
impacted directly. We were talking about the time away, how it impacts your life. And I'll tell you what, that chemo embolization, that was rough. I mean, it was like, you know, that those the drugs they have you on to like make you survive from that, like to deal with it, the steroids and all that type of stuff. Man, I was exhausted, couldn't exercise, gained all sorts of weight, still trying to take it off, right? But I hit my goal. I have a new goal, by the way.
Yep.
New goal is college graduation, right? When we always do this, we create goals for ourselves of what we're going to do. And back to one of the
Like
things
these new
that
milestones that we want.
you make
right?
milestones, and I write software for a living, right? So when we write software, we do certain things. We like to test what we do. We like to write tests to prove that things that we wrote work. I'm a test case. I wear that with pride.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There are people, and
Yes.
I wanted to make sure I got to this. I'm going to take the time now. There are people who did these trials. There are people who did Timtrack who are no longer with us.
That's right.
Because they were in part of the dosing, you know, scaling it up to figure out they were supposed to be on 68. There were probably people who were on 10, probably people who were on like 90 something. There were people who probably weren't going every week. They were doing it like every 4 weeks or something as they were trying to figure out how this worked, that are no longer with us. And I want to thank them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They have given us a reason. For those of us that are on it, they have provided that drug and that the ability for us to do that now. So anything that we do, and it's a small community of us that have this disease, right? Small, there's not a ton of us. So it's only so many people that can go around and try to move the needle for everybody else.
Yeah.
So that's when I think back of like, not only my own personal selfish reasons for doing this, there's a bigger reason we do this. And any of you considering it, thank you. Even if you decide not to.
Yeah.
Thank you for thinking about it.
Oh, I love that. Mike, thank you so much. That was just so
Wonderful.
well put. And so I think it just really captures the empathy, right? I think that all of us here understand the weight of these kinds of decisions, right? The weight of wanting to participate or not, and all of the thinking that goes into it. Like Kim said, the overwhelm, all of it, the emotions, right? There's a lot of emotions around this. There's a lot of emotions around our diagnosis and around wanting to be here. But I love what you said about just thanking the people who have come before and being willing to be one of those people for someone else in the future. I hope, genuinely hope to all things that, because you both have been doing what you've been doing for a duration of time, because I've been doing what I've been doing for a duration of time, that it will continue moving the needle out, or that milestone out, so that we have longer, right? And that we have more opportunities. I just did an interview yesterday, you guys. I'm so excited. I can't tell you exactly who it is, but I did an interview yesterday for a trial that's opening later this year, and it is going to be insane. Like, I am so excited for you guys to be able to find out about this. So stay tuned, stay on the newsletter, make sure you know what's going on, because this is some good stuff coming. And I love what you guys have generally, I feel like you guys have shared really well, like what you wish the other patients knew going into this kind of decision-making process. So thank you guys all for your time. I do wanted to just ask you one last question as we close out. I know we're kind of jumping on the edge of time here, but what do you think, if you could just sum up maybe one thing, and if somebody else says your thing, maybe think of another, but sum up one sentence that you would want to share to the pharmaceutical companies, your doctors, like just your medical teams, about your experience with trials, or just what you wish was your reality. Really, just what do you wish they knew?
I'll start just
Okay,
real
go
quick.
ahead.
It actually brought tears to my eyes to you say that. I have emailed Immunocore a number of times, like, When a child graduated, I sent pictures to them to say, I'm here because of you. When I had a child get married, I sent pictures. I'm here because of you. Thank you. Please pass this along to your team. But I've also sent Immunocore a message because PRAME in particular is not necessarily one of those things that is available to people with ocular melanoma now, because they're looking at it, but they're looking at it because it also treats all these other cancers, and they're, I'm sure, trying to, and I've not heard this, so don't quote me on this, but I don't know if they're trying to recoup some of the money for the amount that was put into Kintrack or what. But right now, there's who's on PRAME Kintrack, they're not adding uveal melanoma, they're adding cutaneous melanoma to the trials, but not uveal. And so I am trying to advocate for people to be able to still get PRAME. And so that's one of the things I want to say to Immunocore. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, but open it back up, because I do believe that it's going to be something that helps people with ocular melanoma in a different way. And even though I'm thrilled it's helping breast cancer and cervical cancer, I think, and there's like 5 other cancers that they're looking at. But I know I'm living proof.
Audience of people, that need it, people that desperately need it, right? That we desperately need it in our community. Okay, right. Thank you. Kim, what about you? What's one thing you wish that pharma, your doctors, medical, researchers could know?
I can't even think of anything. I had such great care from all of them. I guess what I would like, when I hear new people getting diagnosed, my ocular oncologist said to me, I think you have class 2. Your eyeball should be in a jar. We're going to get you in surgery in 2 weeks. That's all you need to know. And that's all he told me. I was in surgery in 2 weeks. I had to go to Miami for a week in the hospital. My wife was in a hotel, down the street. They wouldn't let her in. It was COVID. It's a huge thing. And then after I came out, I had my follow-up. He said, all right, I did a biopsy. We're going to get the results, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do next. I read people online that just get diagnosed, they haven't had their eye taken care of, and they're rushed through PET scans and MRIs, and it's enough already. And they're being thrown more, like, so fast. And I'm just so grateful that my ocular oncologist was like, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And then he goes, yep, it was class 2, Kim. Like I told you, your eye should be in a jar right back here. Back in the day, I had already have taken that out. He told me that so many times. And he says, I'm going to send you to the best in the world. He gave me a thing to Dr. Sato. I had heard of him, of course, because I was researching all this time. But he didn't let me get a hit. I even asked him, should I go for an MRI? And he's like, nope, not. He just
just stayed focused. Like having a doctor who helps you stay focused.
Makes
a big difference.
At all. People are getting PET scans before they had plaque, and still, I get every doctor.
I remember that. That was my reality. Was like a month of treatments. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's mentally a lot. So
a month before treatments is that seems to be a little more, maybe not a little more common for everyone, but that is happening for some people, right? That we have diagnosis, and then we have a bunch of scans, and then we have treatment, and then we have more scans and blood work and biopsy results, and it really is kind of like you're in survival for the first 3 to 6 months of a primary OM diagnosis or a metastatic diagnosis, because there's just a lot of moving parts, and in making sure that to just have medical teams who are checking in with you, right? And having your caretakers check in with you as patients that, like, hey, are you doing okay? Like, you're dealing with a lot right now. Okay. Thank you, Kim. Karen, what about you?
Well, since I was treated in Boston, my first medical oncologist was in Boston. And I, of course, was like, how did this happen? What is how did I get this? And what can I do going forward? And she said, there's nothing you did do. There's nothing you can do. You were just, unfortunately, very unlucky. And I, just that's a bunch of information that you just don't know what to do with. It's like nothing. And so when she says, but we can look for some trials. I said, okay, so let's look for some trials. And she says, unfortunately, there was nothing in Boston. She says, but I'm going to keep looking. And she found the trial that I ended up in New York. And then she says, well, now your team is going to be in New York. So, but when I wasn't sure, remember this, this is a big leap, as we all decided it was. I thank my whole medical community here in Billings, because I reached out to friends and doctors that I knew here. And I said, what do you think? And they all gave me wonderful advice. And with that, I felt confident to move forward and to do this trial. And I never will look back. It was the best thing that I ever did. And I went with confidence. And I didn't want to stop. You know, it was one of those, you know, I would have a reaction and they said, you can quit. And I'm like, nope, I'm not quitting. I gave it everything I had until the last bit when I had the colitis and I had to stop then. And, you know, then we all have to admit that there's something that, you know, we have to do it for the safety of our bodies and so forth.
Yeah.
But I had received enough of the drug to have the benefit of the drug. So there you go. I'm very, very thankful for everyone who led me. And you know, again, I've been blessed along the way, and it was a very good journey. So
Well, thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Mike, do you want to close this out? Anything you wish pharma would know, or even just any, you know, what do you want the patients to know who are listening? I think you did a really good job last time.
Pharma already knows this, but you know, we are a small community who doesn't have a lot of great options, and therefore we are willing to jump on trial. Pharma knows this. That's why they look at cutaneous melanoma too. There was a podcast I listened to with the guy from Moderna, the CFO from Moderna, talking about their trial for cutaneous melanoma with Keytruda and what they're trying to do with mRNA treatment. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on out there. I just want them to say, don't forget about us when you find that next thing, because there's obviously there's a little more cash with the stuff that's diagnosed by more people as they advance. We're simple. I believe the first thing I saw way back when I first was researching is that our cancer is simple genetically, which is why they start looking at us. It's a good option for them to look at. It's easier for them to figure out if these novel treatments will work. So they know this already. Just don't forget about it, is what I would say. To Ashley's point, like, hey, guys, keep us on the trials. People want the stuff. We're willing to do whatever we need to do, or go get it approved. Get it approved for use, and then we can all use it, right?
Or even get patients, right? Get patient stories from people who are benefiting, and maybe that would be something that, like, if you are, I mean, I can't speak to anyone specifically, but like if there's a pharma company out there who maybe is losing funding, then put us in front of you. Like, put us in front of your funding board or your financial board, because we will tell you why it's important and why we are important. And I think that that's one of the power things, the powerful, what do you call it? The powerful attributes of ocular melanoma patients. Everyone that I have met who has been willing to advocate for themselves, you guys are all this powerful source of like passion for just being okay, and passion for like wanting progress for us, for our community.
Wanting to live.
Exactly. And I guess the one last thing I'll give, because I didn't think about this until we were talking towards the end, and I realized, you know, we were talking about like what was it like to make that decision. I can't express exactly like 7 years ago, but 9 months after I was diagnosed, I did a lightning talk at a software conference, and I just realized it's on YouTube. So if you YouTube my left eyeball, you will find me. More than likely, because there's not many people who have a crazy title like my left eyeball. If you find it's like a 7.5 minute talk, I'm not on screen, but there's slides, there's all that type of stuff, and I will tell you exactly why I did the clinical trial that I originally was on.
Wow.
So if you're really interested, you can find that 7-minute talk and go look at it.
Good.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important that we kind of, all of us talked to people, right? For the most part, we talked to people. We talked to our medical teams. We talked to our friends, our new friends, our new ocular melanoma friends. And so I think what I hope that we can give to you guys as our audience who is listening, I hope that we can just give you permission to ask questions, permission to consider the opportunities or to consider the possibilities, and also permission to be scared, permission to be worried and overwhelmed. All of the things, like I've said this before, there are no rules. There are no rules in cancer. You get to make up the rules as you go. And really, that applies to clinical trials, that applies to your scans. I mean, that literally can apply to everything. But you guys, we as a community are so powerful. We're so fortunate to have just trailblazers like Ashley and Mike, Karen and Kim, who you guys have participated in some capacity in a clinical trial to help move the needle forward. And you guys, the needle is moving. If you talk to your doctors, the ones who are really well versed in ocular melanoma, they will tell you the same. The needle is moving. If you're
Mhm.
not seeing that, stay tuned, stay in the loop with A Cure in Sight here. We are your top source of information. Like literally, if
Mhm.
you look on the
Mhm.
internet, we are the best place you can get information about ocular melanoma, like anywhere in the world. We
Mhm.
are the best place and the best source of information because we are doing everything we can to make sure we're staying current. We're staying in the loop with all of our pharma companies, with all of the doctors who know what's going on in the research community. So you guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
and for our panel, for your time this afternoon, morning, on a Saturday morning, I guess. We're so thankful for your time. And,
Yeah.
and I want to just echo again, just to end what Mike said. Thank you to everyone who came before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it like, I
Yeah,
mean, like Ashley said, like
absolutely.
it makes me so emotional to think about
Mhm.
that because I am far enough in my journey now that I know people who have helped pave the way and who are no longer with us. So I just want to take a second just to honor those people. So if you're listening to the recording, just, send a little extra light to those families.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Well, I didn't mean to do that,
Yeah.
guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
Oh,
You have nothing to
um,
apologize for.
Yep.
Nope.
Yep.
I don't. You're right. I
Mm.
don't have anything to apologize for, but I always get all like, can't talk when I cry. So there's that.
So there's that.
Yes, so there's that. But you guys, I really hope this has been helpful. If you have questions, please comment those questions. We can't take any questions right now, but please go ahead and just send them to me at contact@acareinsight.org. You can message us on social media and we're happy to answer questions that way. If you have questions for these people, I would be willing to bet they're going to be willing to answer your questions in a Facebook
Yeah,
group,
absolutely.
or I can
Absolutely.
send questions over to them via email, and we'll just do our best to make sure that, and if you guys have any questions, we can get them answered. By way of announcements,
Wonderful.
today was the 5K for the
Yeah.
LA area. I want to make sure I'm getting that right. So this morning, the 5K happened in the Los Angeles area. So thank you to everybody who participated there, who helped to fundraise. We've got a couple more races coming up. I believe we've got Dallas coming up in November, and then we've got Scottsdale in November as well. So make sure to sign up for a race or get signed up for your next race if you're planning to participate, because this is one of the ways we get the word out, right? This is one of the ways that we show as a community that we are making waves, because we need to make those waves. We need to make a statement. We need to make a statement in our communities. We need to make a statement on the internet, on the social media platforms. So help us make those statements. Run those, social media fundraisers for your birthday, for Giving Tuesday, whatever you've got coming up. Like, we really appreciate any and every little bit of effort that you can do to help us advocate. So if you're not able to participate, or you're not eligible, or at a place where you need to be in a trial, please consider helping us fundraise as a community to get funds for ocular melanoma, for research, for patient aid, all of those things. And then finally, last thing, I promise, we have the I Believe conference happening on October 18th and 19th. And if you're coming in person, we'll see you on the 17th for the welcome reception. Today is the last day to get your hotel room if you're coming to Scottsdale to come and hang out with me, which I want to go hiking with anyone who wants to come and hang out with me. We're going to go on a sunset hike. I promise you won't die. It won't be hot. We're going to be fine. We're going to pray. Anyway, if you're coming to believe, you can head to our website, acareinsight.org/education-events. If you're having trouble finding it, please reach out to me and I'm happy to help. But thank you again for everybody for your time. And we've got some thanks from the audience as well. And we'll see you guys next time.